point. It is an apples to oranges comparison, and one that the mayor likes to make because it really isn't accurate and isn't true.
You know,
Mr. Mayor?
You don't get a medal for rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, and that's exactly what he did.
You know, since we are going to go back and forth, and that's clear, the truth is back then, if it wouldn't have been for the work that I did at the Board of Education, mayoral control probably would not have happened. If I hadn't stood up and got involved when Mike Bloomberg, back when he wasn't involved and paid no attention to education, I chose to get involved. I chose to help bring reform to an institution that had lacked it for decades. So the truth is, if it wasn't for the work that I did, mayoral control wouldn't have happened. When people like Mike Bloomberg sat back and did nothing, when our children were suffering and not learning, I chose to get involved and take on a difficult situation.
Okay, we have to move on now, gentlemen. Let's now go to our panel. And our first question of the night from the panel, it comes from Brian Lair, who has a question for Controller Thompson.
Thank you, Dominic. Good evening, both of you candidates. And Mr. Thompson, you get the first response on a question about term limits. You, I understand, oppose term limits as an idea, and you don't like referenda, which is how term limits were enacted in New York City, and yet you're making this a central issue in your campaign with respect to the term limits extension law that's allowing the mayor to run. How much do you really think that the voters should take the term limits question into account compared to the mayor's record?
Well, first, I think that let's set the stage. For 7 years, Mike Bloomberg promised the voters of New York City that under no circumstance would he try and avoid the public by changing term limits. It's as simple as that. I think his phrase was, it would be disgraceful to go around the people of New York City and to go to the city council and change term limits. And in the end, when self-interest called, he did just that. He went around the people of New York City, he went to the city council and changed term limits. I think the voters of New York City are insulted. I think they're upset by the fact that the mayor undermined democracy and went around them. I think they would like to have a vote on the issue of term limits. That's what they said all along. So I just think that right now, as he continues to spend money to try and convince voters and rewrite history that he didn't undermine term limits, he didn't, in fact, betray the trust that he had with the people of New York City, I think it is an issue. And I think it's one that the voters of New York City still aren't happy about.
Mr. Mayor.
We all know that we have a very difficult time here with the recession. A lot of my friends came to me, and people that I didn't even know, and asked me to run again. And I thought, you know, in the end, on November 3rd, we'll have a vote on what really matters, a vote between two candidates. And the public has to decide that day which of the two candidates they want to take this city forward. They have to decide who's got the best record and who has promises for the future that are practical, can be implemented, and that we can afford. They've got to take a look at how we've conducted ourselves in the past and say, okay, I hope that person will do it going forward. And I think in the end, that's the key here. Two candidates, who can lead the city? Who's going to improve education? Who's going to bring down crime? Who's going to be there as a steward through tough financial times? Who's going to improve public health? Who's going to work on the environment and get guns off the streets? That's the issue facing the voters.
So are you saying, Mr. Mr. Bloomberg, are you saying that the promises not to extend term limits that you made that Mr. Thompson referenced, unless you're saying you didn't make those promises, don't matter, and that you're the indispensable man for this city?
No, nobody is indispensable, but the voters have a choice. And if that's their issue on November 3rd, they can express themselves. They have lost absolutely nothing. They've just got more choice this way.
The voters of New York City spoke twice. Overwhelmingly, they said serve 2 terms and then leave. And that was the commitment. That was the bond that we had with the people of New York City when we ran the first time. We promised that we would adhere to the rules. We wouldn't have had the opportunity to run if it wouldn't have been for that. So to turn around then later and say that's not what the people of New York City meant, they said it twice, they said it loudly and resoundingly.
Mr. Thompson, does that trump the record?
It's not a question of trumping the record. We're talking about right and wrong. Should not have been allowed to run a third time. The people of New York had spoken, and to do it so cynically, by waiting until the last minute when the referendum couldn't go on the ballot, really is the height of hypocrisy. It is wrong. Mike Bloomberg lied to the people of New York City.
To follow up very briefly, Mr. Mayor, you know there are many people who think you're doing a very good job in office, but who are very offended by this and think it's a breach of democracy. Are you at all embarrassed by it?
No, I understand their thoughts. I understand their views. But in the end, the choices that face them are vote for my opponent or vote for me. And if they feel that term limits was the most important thing, they can express themselves.
Will you promise tonight not to run for a fourth term?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that a yes?
That is a yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Brian. And now we go to Adam Lisberg. Adam?
Yeah, good evening. Mr. Bloomberg, in your time in office, teacher salaries have gone up 43%. Total education operating expenditures of the DOE have gone up 55%. Do you really think most parents would agree that the schools are 43% or 55% better?
I don't think that's the measure because there's inflation built in there. There's the competitive factor. We have to pay our teachers what they can make elsewhere. After all, while they're dedicated people and they want to help our children and they don't go into public service to make a lot of money, they still have to pay the rent. They still have to buy food. They still want to go on a vacation. And so paying them is just the beginning. It is giving them the opportunity to really help our kids that attracts them to come here. But they still certainly deserve the getting paid not as much as they'd like, but as much as we can afford, a fair wage. And a ways to set a fair wage is to look what they can make in the surrounding counties. You know, in the end, these teachers have made the difference. Education is one teacher looking one child in the eye. And we want the best teachers we can possibly find. They say in real estate, three things matter: location, location, location. In education, it's quality of teacher, quality of teacher, quality of teacher. And when I came into office, I said education was my #1 priority. That's where we're going to put our money, and that's exactly what we have done. And I think the results show. The reason the kids are doing better, as much as anything, is the teachers. It's also the principals. It's also the parent coordinators. It's also the school safety agents. It's also the parents, and it's certainly the kids. But teachers are the key to education. And if you want the best, you got to pay them.
Mr. Thompson, I'm curious your response. And I also want to ask you, you've been very critical of how the mayor has run the schools since it became clear that you'd be running against him. I'm wondering why you weren't more vocal before last year.
I think I have been vocal over the last 7 years. I've pointed out a number of the problems at the Department of Education. I've talked about the failure to involve parents and really include parents in this school system over the last 7 years. They have been shut out. I've talked about the George Bush No Child Left Behind focus on standardized testing that's being employed right now, and how that is wrong, and our children are being taught to take tests, but they're not learning critical thinking, comprehension, and the ability to be able to compete on a global economy. I've pointed out the lack of fiscal transparency and waste and the rise of no-bid contracts at the Department of Education over the last 7 years also. So over that period of time, I haven't been silent. I've been a critic. I've been perhaps at times a vocal critic, and I know the Department of Education and the mayor would wish I would go away. But I've stood up and fought for what I believe is right. Mr. Bloomberg?
You know, we do test our kids. We give them the same tests that were given during the time that my opponent ran the old Board of Education. They are mandated state tests mostly. We give them the same test that a potential employer will give them. And if the test is, can you read? The answer is that we should be giving that test, and the good news is our kids are doing better on that test by that standard all the time. But let me say one thing. If you believe that the school system was better when Bill Thompson ran it, you should vote for him. And if you believe it's better than now, then I'd appreciate your vote. You should vote for me.
Okay, thank you very much, Adam. And now we go to Juan Manuel Benitez.
Gracias, Dominic. Gracias, señor alcalde. Gracias, señor Contralor, por haber aceptado la invitación a debatir aquí en el Museo del Barrio.